Thank you for tuning in to Real True Facts, the Real True podcast. We are back with a brand new show for you this week. My name is Elle Woods.
And I am James Mason.
Not that one. Yeah. Don't let your mind play tricks on you, dear listeners, because today we are talking all about the Mandela effect.
Right. This was a listener suggestion that just became so interesting that we had to cover it. I think it's interesting because it's not one of those sort of just hard, fast rules like, oh, well, it's this or it isn't. It's a new exploration for us here at Real True Facts, I think.
It is, because we don't know one way or the other. The Mandela effect is sort of this phenomenon called false memory. It's when you remember something that didn't happen, but you believe it did. But the interesting thing about the Mandela effect is that large groups of people remember this. They remember something. The best example I can give is the Shazam movie with Sinbad. People think that happened, but that didn't really happen. And the Berenstain Bears, or Berenstein, so many people remember it being spelled differently. And so you kind of have these discrepancies between different groups of people that remember it one way and remember it another.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about it is that there are these. It's shared that multiple people believe one way or another, and when we talk to our very learned guest this week, I think that's going to be part of the fun. Is just wading through these different examples and some of these different cases. So it'll be exciting to see what. What the general populace thinks or thought or will think versus, what we may think or know or think we know.
Yeah. And I want to be convinced of something because right now I'm not sure. I have very vivid memories of the Berenstain Bears thing and Shazam with Sinbad. I, without a doubt, remember watching a movie with Sinbad playing a genie. I have that memory.
That's and again, I think maybe as we mentioned in one of our previous episodes when we kind of introduced this, that perhaps it was Sinbad in one of his many just stellar roles. He happened to wear very genie-esque clothing, so maybe it's this sort of of how the memory works and develops these kind of new things. Speaking of how the memory works in the brain, should we just go ahead and bring in Dr. Seymour if we have him?
Yeah, let's bring him in up from the science bunker today. I know he's very busy with his experiments, so Dr. Seymour, come on up.
Hey, it's good to hear from you guys.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, great to have your great to have your great scientific mind with us this week. And just to get started, we're talking about the human brain. Like we're not starting lightly here. Human brain and memories and this weird phenomenon of kind of collective memory. What have you heard of this Mandela effect?
I have heard of this. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Because it kind of combines a couple different things that we're trying to learn or figure out about the brain, but also once you start to get into the collective conscious, that's where we're still finding a lot of challenges there. But yeah, in terms of whether we want to call it making false memories, misremembering, it kind of has some overlap with a deja vu experience. And a lot of that kind of tied into how the brain works.
Okay. So in layperson's terms, what is a memory? Is it really just is it a wrinkle in our gray matter, or how does that in the most simple terms, how does that kind of work?
Yeah. We do a lot of times, call it a wrinkle in the brain, but really a lot of the brain activity is, it's about making connections. They're technically like little electric sparks, if you will. And a memory initiates itself as just that one snap or spark. And then or excuse me, it's not a memory at that point. It is the thought, if you will, and then it becomes a memory when we can repeat that path over and over and over and again, and kind of get it worn in like like you're cutting through your neighbor's yard over and over on that same beaten path.
Okay, so we're creating a pathway and then continuing to take it.
And that's when we convince ourselves that is reality.
Yes, exactly. And it's all about how, for different people, it takes a different amount of time and repetition to create that pathway. At different times in your life, that pathway may be easier or harder to create. But in general, that's what we're looking at, and all the different versions of, oh, I can't remember this, or I used to be able to remember stuff, or no, I even, like the Mandela effect, like we said, is maybe different versions of how our brain is taking a path or interpreting the path it's taking.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense on an individual basis, but what happens when you have large groups of people, tens, hundreds, thousands maybe, remembering something a specific way, and then information comes out and says, oh, it really wasn't like that, and they have proof going back, and people get really confused, and that's when we have these sort of like viral campaigns of this whole Berenstain Bears thing, that we have people remembering and swearing that it was a certain way, and then it's not. What causes a giant group of people to remember one thing collectively?
Well, that's what we're looking at, and there's the remembering something that didn't happen. The nearest thing we can tell, or kind of in lay terms here, is instead of your brain putting something into the short-term memory or realizing it's taking a path for the first time, it accidentally digs too deep of a trench there. And the first time you're seeing something, your brain is tricked into thinking it has gone down this path before. So it kind of takes, oh, I'm seeing this for the first time, but that you've seen it before. And, that's how we might think of, okay, well, that's a deja vu, or I'm seeing this, but I've seen it before, something like that, and still doesn't answer your collective conscious question. But we're seeing that people with certain traits are more likely to exhibit this. It's at this point tied to very early childhood experiences. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly tied to the duration, the frequency, the time of day, and the diet of the mother for breastfeeding children. Mm-hmm. How susceptible you are to that sort of misremembering. But we're still trying to find, because everyone, when we're talking about the Sinbads, we're talking about the namesake here, Mandela's death, all of those different things.
Right, because people thought he passed away in prison, but he passed away in 2013, but they thought he died in the 80s.
Exactly.
But that was not true.
So the question is that everybody who has those experiences swears by, and it's really hard to disprove. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing I love more than disproving something, especially if it can be proving a whole bunch of people wrong about Sinbad.
Sure. I wonder if, I think my question is, maybe isn't a big part of this that these memories and these examples don't exist in a vacuum, right? So if it's in our memories, can they be influenced by other people and other things around us, so that over time our memories go from being accurate and correct, but much later just changed and different?
Yeah, there's a lot of reason to believe that, like, those paths by some sort of that are in your brain by some sort of outside or maybe inside or more subtle or even mechanical, electrical, technological way can be kind of trained or turned in a certain direction. There's the question, like, with let's pick one of the Berenstain Bears, for example. Did each person have that specific memory that certain way, or was it when one person said that and then somebody else and all of those people's moms ate a whole bunch of spicy food when they breastfed them at 9 p.m. every Saturday night, and there's just this group that we have a domino effect that it went viral? Or probably the most likely effect, and we wouldn't call this Mandela effect now, but look back a couple of years from now, or maybe a couple generations from now, you talk to your parents and grandparents, and when they click on the thing on the Google, and then the Facebook thing pops up, and the this and the that, how did it know I was searching for that? Is it the computer doing that, or is there some technology within the algorithms there, or something even above the algorithms maybe pointing them a certain way?
Yes.
Oh, so that's interesting. Did the Mandela effect exist before Google or before the search engine? That's pretty interesting. I think that's something to consider. We may need to bring that up when later when we have our guest on, I think.
I agree. Well, we'll go ahead and say thank you to Dr. Seymour. I know he's a busy scientist. He's got to get back down into the bunker. But I have all these questions now about past lives and surveillance and things like that might be we might be able to talk about later. But thank you, Dr. Seymour. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with before you head back down to the bunker?
Not really. That was what we know now. I can't wait to hear. It's always good to hear from another expert in a field like this, and hopefully our collective, conscience and memory can move forward a little bit to cracking this mystery.
Wonderfully put. Thank you, Dr. Seymour. We'll say goodbye to him, and we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll meet our special guest. Welcome back. Our guest today is Dr. Roger Sterling, former chief ontologist for Elon Musk. Dr. Roger, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Great for you to join us. And I have to say, being the chief ontologist with someone like Elon Musk, I conjure up images in my head of basically a highly educated fortune teller or mystic. Is that, how accurate is that?
You're not far off, because this is a guy who dreams up SpaceX, and then at the same time he's like throwing baby names out to you, like, that are clicks and numbers, and you're just like, okay, where's this coming from? So he's always got you on your toes, and you wonder. The question I get asked a lot is, who keeps around a chief ontologist? But
Sure.
for someone like Elon Musk, it's he's one of these guys who has so much going on that he sometimes, as you guys were alluding to with Dr. Seymour, he sometimes has trouble remembering. This is going to sound weird, but did this really happen to him? And that that was sort of how we kind of came together in the beginning. Was he was just curious and about going down that road a little deeper, and that's how we got together.
Man.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and that's amazing. I wish, if I were that wealthy, I'd love to have a reality aid, a reality expert by my side. So when
Okay.
something happened or I thought deja vu, I could,
Yeah.
hey, what did that happen? And have I been here before? Have I said that before?
I have to be honest with you. I laughed at him to his face the first time he offered me a job, and but he was dead serious, and so I said, okay, well, I'll at least let's see where this goes. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
Because that was my major question, because I wasn't sure what an ontologist actually was. I didn't want to be that person that said, oh, what is it? But what I'm inferring is that an ontologist is someone who helps another person remember. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
define it for our listeners, because I was very unclear on the title.
So I wouldn't say that that's the sole purpose of an ontologist, but it's more about help. One of the things that you can do when you're helping an individual like Elon is to sort of map back to that memory or that remembrance, and then sort of figure out how you got there and where it may stem from. Is it real or is it not real? Ontology is really is very closely related to metaphysics, philosophy. So there's a lot of crossover between those fields.
Wow. So yeah, that just sounds so interesting. And after the fact, and now that we're hearing it, it seemed silly, but I'm like, oh, that makes sense for someone like that who's a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get to be a visionary without thinking and approaching differently than we normal plebes might. They want someone around who can map a brain or help recall facts and debate the existence of reality.
It was a very unique experience. There's not a lot of chances to do work like this sort of outside of the academic field or other similar areas. So this was a very unique opportunity for me, and I enjoyed it. So and it's fun now to be here and talk with you guys about sort of what I do.
Oh yeah, and our topic today is very interesting to us in sort of a psychology way and a paranormal way, because we're working with something that we don't know. People say that space is the final frontier. I think the brain is the final frontier, because there's just so much that we don't know about it. And so I'd like to ask you about what a day in the life is like for somebody like you. Like if you, because I know you're a former, but if you were working for Elon, what would be like a normal day for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we would probably in one of our sessions talk about ideas that he had, and Elon gets very into his head, right? So he's trying to determine. Let's take SpaceX for example. Throwing ideas by you and these plans that he has, but this plan doesn't sound familiar. Could it be from was it maybe introduced by someone else in the past, or is it from a movie, or is it from a book? And then we sort of work through those, that sort of, you heard Dr. Seymour describe it as pathways. We sort of work through those pathways to, search for the inspiration behind these ideas and where are they coming from. So, I would say I've probably got an easy daily schedule in terms of a 9 to 5 job. Maybe it's a couple hours of being philosophical with one of the richest, smartest men in the world. But that would be a typical day with Elon.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So anyway, yeah, this week we're talking about the Mandela effect, and it almost sometimes it treads into kind of pop science or pop psychology, and it seems to be part of the mainstream internet culture at the moment, and I think it's. And some people, I think, do find it a little concerning that they may have memories of things that never happened. I mean, our very own Elle Woods here swears that she has memories of what was it, of Sinbad being
Shazam. I have Dr. Sterling, I'll tell you exactly what my memory is. Maybe you can help me decipher it, because knowing about this, it makes me feel like I can't trust myself, and I don't like that. But my memory is that I remember being a kid sitting on my parents' bed watching Sinbad as a genie in a movie called Shazam. And even years later, I met a friend when I was in college, and he said that he was in that movie, that he played a cab driver in that movie, and remembers shooting it. And now people are saying that it doesn't exist. And so it's very disconcerting to me, because why would I have this memory, and why would a large group of people have the same memory, and now suddenly it's not true?
Yeah, that's actually a very common one. And people also think that on sort of this one's more explainable, but people also think Shaquille O'Neal was in a movie called Shazam, which we know it was Kazam.
Kazam, yeah.
That's a very common one. But to your point, I get that one a lot. And my theory is that if you remember, Sinbad did a lot of stand-up in the 80s in these very brightly colored neon parachute pants that almost look like what we would call maybe genie pants. I think people have those memories of seeing him on TV in those clothes, and then sort of crossing over that, oh, he must have been in this movie Shazam as a genie, when that really wasn't the case.
Yeah.
That's my theory anyway.
Yeah.
People have that memory.
And I can accept that, but deep down, I still feel like it's not true. I still feel like I have this memory. So whether it is true or isn't, how do we deal with the fact that we might feel that it's still true?
Well, I think you have to, you have to come to terms with it. You have to sort of basically take a look at things and go, okay, I have to accept this. I have to move on. Other people have made this mistake. It's not unique to me, so I shouldn't get too bent out of shape about it. I mean, there are lots of other examples I could give you. And part of my job when I do these talks, or when I talk to people like yourself and like James about this, is that they really, somewhere along the way, in one of the examples I deliver, their mind gets blown by the end of the conversation, whether they are, oh, I've heard of that one before, that I never had that misunderstanding. But there will be one example in the conversation that will really throw them for a loop, and send them off to Google or whatever to verify that what I'm saying is true.
Wow. That might be a good segment for the show. Minds Blown, or Reality Check with Dr. Roger Sterling.
Yeah,
do you have do you have any sort of test or like bullets?
Yeah. Would you guys want to do some right now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm always up for a reality check, however harsh it may be. So
I love quizzes. So
yeah, we do have an affinity for.
We love quizzes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's start with something that's sort of small. Okay. So I'm going to ask you both the correct name for Cheez-It. Is it Cheez-Its or Cheez-It?
Plural or singular?
The actual brand name. Is it Cheez-Its or Cheez-It?
Cheez-Its.
It's Cheez-It.
It's Cheez-It. There is no Z or S on the end of the brand name.
Okay. All right.
That's one.
Okay.
So Reality Shattered one for Elle Woods, and
Cheez-It sounds wrong, but okay.
How about Curious George, the monkey? We're all familiar with Curious George.
Yeah.
Did Curious George have a tail?
No, he did not have a tail.
Well, and I'm going to say yes because he's a monkey.
He did not have a tail.
Ah.
Yeah.
I guess that evens things out a bit. 1-to-1, reality shattered.
I'm thinking about it. He used to wear outfits, and I don't ever remember seeing a tail coming out of the outfits. So. And
I just think, a monkey has a tail.
Monkey.
How about the Monopoly guy, whose real name, just fun fact here, was Rich Uncle Pennybags?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Pennybags. What about him?
Yeah.
Did he wear a monocle?
Yes.
Yeah, of course so.
He did not wear a monocle. Yeah.
Oh, maybe Mr. Peanut wears a monocle.
Okay.
Oh, so he does not. That's weird. Okay. Yeah. All right.
The Flintstones.
Okay.
How many T's are in the word Flintstones?
Flintstone 2?
I'm going to say 1.
2 T's.
Flintstones.
Flintstones.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it's Flynn. But
no one says I'm going to go have a Flintstone vitamin.
Yeah.
No one says that. That's ridiculousness. Yeah, so one more, doctor.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Can I actually do 2 more? Because
fine, doctor. 2 more shatters to my reality while you're at it.
Saving these 2 for I was building up.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so this one's a pretty common one. Can anyone tell me what the last line from Vader is to Luke Skywalker in Empire Strikes Back?
The famous one?
The famous one, yeah.
It's Luke, I am your father.
Luke, I am your father.
Yes? Is that you both have the same answer?
Yeah, Luke, I am your father. Yeah.
He actually never says Luke. He only says, I'm your father.
What?
But he's looking at Luke, right?
He is, yes. But he never says, Luke, I am your father.
He just says, I am your
we
father.
Remember it as Luke, I am your father.
Okay.
And last one for you is we've all at least seen the clip of Tom Cruise in Risky Business. You know, the famous scene where he comes sliding into the hallway.
Right. Yeah, I've heard. I've heard that when you're in middle school and you're a girl, you pause it or something, or you're watching that scene on repeat or something.
Okay, sure.
That's got to be a thing.
Is he wearing sunglasses in that scene?
Yes.
No, he is not.
He is not wearing sunglasses in that scene.
Where did the sunglasses come from then?
Because he's wearing sunglasses in the poster.
Okay. Well, that's a trick question because he is and he isn't.
But my point is that you've heard over time, you've heard people say, Luke, I am your father.
Yes.
You've seen people impersonate the Risky Business scene wearing sunglasses. You've heard people call them Cheez-Its. All these different examples. And so over time, we've come to accept these things as being fact when in actuality they're not. And so these are examples of the Mandela effect. And I would expand on what Dr. Seymour said earlier about, pathways through neighbors' yards. Another way to think of these memories is the game of telephone. And so each time you try to remember the memory, and the older you get, the memory becomes like a game of telephone, and it gets distorted over time until you don't remember it quite exactly as it was, even though you're 100% certain that it's real.
Yeah, and then you have people like me. When I play telephone, I would change it on purpose in the middle of the game, so it would be like crazy at the end. But yes, I that makes sense. We hear one thing, especially with like the Flintstones. Mm-hmm. When we speak, I think it's called dentalizing a T. We do a D, or we drop the T because that's how people speak. So they'll say Flintstones rather than Flintstones. Mm-hmm. And so over time, people believe that there is no T in the middle.
Sure. And, it's also, you get into a whole sociology thing, too, with these examples, because if enough people tell you that's the way it is, then you start to believe it. You go, okay, yeah, I guess it must be. If you say it is, and then she says it is, then, so there's a lot of other fields that sort of can come into this, philosophy, like we said, metaphysics, but also these sociological experiments that could be done in terms of convincing someone to remember something a different way than maybe they did before.
Wow. That has some pretty hefty implications. I think we'll have to delve into that a little bit further after we come back from a quick break. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Welcome back after a short break. This week on Real True Facts, we're talking about the Mandela effect with Roger Sterling, PhD. So, Roger, before we went into a break, we were starting to get into some of the heady sociological implications of of creating a lie and reinforcing the lie. One thing that I can't help think about that it keeps coming back with the reliability of our memories is court, is how, you bring in someone's testimony and they say, oh, well, I saw this person at this exact time and they were wearing this exact thing and they were doing this exact stuff. Mm-hmm. In your expert opinion, in your opinion, how reliable are our memories?
Well, I think it depends too on the distance away from the event occurring. I think the closer you are to it, obviously, the more reliable your memory is. I mean, the examples that we were talking about before the break, a lot of those are from most of our childhoods, right? So, of course, we're talking about 10, 20, 30 years on. So I think, if we're talking about these examples, that to me is different than, being in court 6 months to a year later. Now, the point that you raise is one that defense attorneys and prosecutors both, depending on the timing, will bring up in a court. I mean, we've seen that before. How reliable is this witness's testimony? Where were you standing? What did you see? Asking you to remember other little details. And so, yes, when you get into our recollections of these details, no matter how minute, those can be used against you in a court of law to cast doubt upon your recollection in a given situation.
Well, people are highly suggestible too. There's a lot of external factors that I think can manipulate somebody's memory or change it in a certain way. These false memories are part of what's called like a false memory syndrome. I did a little bit of research prior to this because I just wasn't sure about this whole Mandela effect. And there are a few things that go into that. Trauma, sleep deprivation, hypnosis even. There's a lot of ways that people can become manipulated. And, I think it's different than our memory changing over the years because when you're a kid, you remember things differently, or you only remember the good things, or you only remember the bad things. In the case of the Berenstain Bears thing, I'm open to believing that I remember it as Berenstain just because maybe that book was read to me, and that is how my mom pronounced Berenstain, or I heard it away and I remember it being Berenstein, or it changed as I talked about it. So, I can see those things gradually changing, and then ultimately we remember it that way. But very interesting point to bring up is this idea of manipulation in the brain, gaslighting, trauma, those things like that, because that changes perception as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. Well, you touched on it in what you were just saying. So there are different external factors that can have an effect on your memory. So lack of sleep, or maybe you haven't eaten in a while, or you've been under a lot of stress. And, these things can be used if we go back to the court proceedings example that James raised. So, we've seen in the past or read reports of police or investigators using these tactics to when they're questioning a witness and, maybe not getting the answer they want. You keep someone in an interview room holding cell and for hours at a time, and then you start to ask them, well, are you sure you saw it that way? Could it have maybe been this way? And of course, then the person starts to doubt themselves. Maybe their memory changes based on the fact that the person they're talking to wants to hear a certain answer from them. So there's a number of things that can affect the way, not just our memories, but the way in which we recall them. To your point about the Berenstain Bears or Berenstain Bears, absolutely. If someone read you that book and that was their pronunciation, and especially from a trusted person like a mother, then of course you have no reason to ever doubt that that's the way it was. So there's just a number of factors. You can't nail it down to one or two things about why we believe something is a certain way that it is.
So Elle used a certain term that I've heard seems to be really hot right now on the internet and in the media, gaslighting. What is that?
Well, gaslighting, simply put, is to tell you that what you've seen or what you read didn't actually happen, and that what you're seeing or reading you shouldn't believe, and something else happened in its place. That's essentially what gaslighting is. Maybe the most famous literary example is if we look at the book 1984 by Orwell. That famous line, the party told you, well, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember it off the top of my head, but the party told you not to believe your own eyes and ears, so to speak. And so, if you read something and you go, oh, well, okay, so the president said he wasn't going to do this. He was not going to outlaw this. Or he was going to outlaw this. I'm sorry. And then the next day he tells you, no, I never said that. Well, he's gaslighting you. He's attempting to gaslight you and telling you not to believe what you've heard or read previously.
So this is almost like forcing the, for lack of a better term, for using our own show title, but it's almost like forcing the Mandela effect for your own personal gain or for nefarious purposes or for, I guess, to your own means, kind of forcing this Mandela effect. Is that what this is? What gaslighting is?
Possibly to a degree. Earlier before the break, we were talking about pop culture examples, and those are fun. Mm-hmm. But I would argue that along the same lines you're talking about, that there is another type of Mandela effect, and that is where it almost becomes a coping mechanism. And so we don't want to remember things the way that they necessarily were.
Repression, right? Repressed memory.
Yes, that we want to remember them in a much rosier way or a better way that's more comfortable to us to then be able to process them or carry them with us in the future.
Well, and I've said this before, it is our brain's job to make sense of nonsense. We want to have a reason for everything. And if someone was going to gaslight another person, ultimately, if they kept at it and they were convincing with it, our brain would accept what they were saying as true because we want to make sense of it. So, say, oh, I never said that. And you go, well, I think you did. And they keep insisting they didn't say it. Eventually, you're going to go, well, did they? Maybe they didn't. Yeah. And so a person can end up convincing someone else something happened. Even if their memory is accurate, they might start to believe that it isn't. And that's a really scary thing for me is I want to be able to trust my memory. I want to be able to trust my brain and all that. And so that is that's almost like a psychic attack as far as I'm concerned. And so I am afraid of people using this for evil and not just for fun Star Wars quotes.
Yeah, you're 100% right. There are people who, can look at the pop culture side and go, well, that's fun. I always thought it was this, or I thought this song lyric was this, when in fact it's this. And then there's the other side who, who worry that they're being manipulated, or perhaps they had a family member who had, let's say, Alzheimer's or something, and they're worried that they may get it. So, there are people who obsessively take sort of like memory tests and do these mental exercises to make sure that, it never happens to them. There's two sides of the coin on this, and there's, like everything, I guess, there's sort of a good side that we can talk and joke about, and then there's another side.
And we actually, now that I think about it, have encountered this numerous times on this show when it comes to, Bigfoot. People will deny it, whether they're personally denying it to themselves or whether it's a government agency with aliens and extraterrestrials. I mean, that's, that's happening every day, trying to rewrite the memory and say, no, that never happened. Well, yes, it did. I saw it. Well, did you see it?
Yeah, and then we have to make shows like this saying that those things did happen because someone has to set the record straight.
Wow. Who knew that the Mandela effect would cut to the core of real true facts?
I didn't know.
That's really what this show ends up being all about.
I had a good idea that would be the case.
So what are some exercises we can do? You mentioned exercise. Maybe these are ones that you did with Elon Musk. What are some things that we can do as regular people trying to hang on to our precious memories? What can we do to protect those?
Oh, gosh. Well, write things down. That's one thing. Keep a journal, keep a diary. There's an old Japanese saying that the faintest ink is better than the sharpest memory. So, writing things down, keeping a journal, keeping a diary, that's great to help you with your memory. There are things that you can do like sequential exercises. So trying to remember different words or phrases in the correct order, kind of testing yourself that way. Things like that. But there are a number of them. Those are a couple of examples.
Writing things down. I never thought of that.
I feel like writing things down and then reading them again.
Well, we have a hard time with that.
Yeah, maybe that's what's caused this big Mandela effect problem is no one writes anything down anymore. And it just turned into one big game of cyber telephone where someone's, writes on the internet, Luke, I am your father. And the next thing you know, that's the truth.
Did you guys ever, when you were in school or anything, did you ever hear, if you, you write it down and then you read it back to yourself, that's supposed to help with your, your memory, or if you study while listening to classical music, that's supposed to help you retain knowledge, things like
that. I guess I just always thought that was BS, to be honest. And now I wish I had taken that bit more seriously.
Well, I would study with classical music on because I was so desperate to retain information, especially with subjects that I wasn't that great at. So I would listen to classical music, and whether it worked or not, I believed it did. And so I felt like I was more intelligent when I listened to the music. And I talk about the power of intent a lot, and I think that the mind has huge capabilities when it comes to, if you believe in something, then it's true. Whether it is or isn't, you believe it is.
Right. Yeah. The power of classical music, I think, is cannot be overstated.
And here's the thing. I don't really remember the subjects that I was learning, but I remember the songs that I would listen to. So I remembered something.
Well, now here's the question. I mean,
Yeah.
do you really remember what the songs were, or do you think you remember?
Well, I remember the CDs,
Hmm.
and I remember liking certain composers more than others. I mean, I guess I never really knew what the songs were called because classical songs have really long titles that don't really make sense.
Yeah, or
It's
it's
like,
just numbers and
yeah,
letters.
it's like number 2 Allegro. It's like, well, that could be anything. I don't know what that is. Like,
Yeah, number 2 of 4 in the set of 9, and
yeah, like
it's just
I can't remember what that's called.
it's nonsense. It's
So, but I know when I hear it.
right, and I just asked that because it's scary now, because it makes me I wonder now. I mean, if we had thought we'd seen Shazam or Kazam,
Yeah.
and we're definitely sure of it now, are some of my most treasured memories just fiction that I made up or that has evolved over time.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the thing. Do I remember for sure? No. But do I think I remember? Yes. So I guess I remember.
So, before we wrap this week up, Dr. Sterling, we kind of went over our what kind of things can we do to mental exercises and things. Are there any other bits of advice you would kind of give our listeners when it comes to things like the Mandela effect or memory or gaslighting or protecting and cherishing our own memories or anything, words of wisdom?
Well, for starters, I would say don't stress yourself out about certain things that you may not remember the way you think you should. There are some things that are important to remember, and there are other things that aren't so much. And the brain can only hold so much information. I mean, that's not literally true, but from a human standpoint, we can only retain so much information, right? Something's going to get pushed to the back of our memory for something else. That's just the way it works. In terms of gaslighting or on that topic, I think the most important thing is to consider the sources that you get your information from, and it doesn't hurt to check for a second source in these cases to really verify that that what you're seeing and hearing is accurate, and that it's true to either memory or something that you should be retaining.
Yeah. Well, that's the mission statement of our show. We give you the real true facts, but ultimately, we want our listeners to find the truth.
Yeah. And that's the exact right approach.
Yeah.
And as trustworthy as as you guys are in your show, even beyond trusting, hopefully it starts a conversation and gets people to want to learn more about the topic just in general, just for their own education, not even from a trust standpoint.
Oh, exactly. So what we hope to do is inspire people to find facts on their own and then help report those back. I think that's a big part of this communication loop. And speaking of communication,
I was going to say, speaking of
wow, okay,
yeah,
I'll take that.
Go for it.
So, but thanks again for joining us this week, Dr. Sterling.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you guys for having me. This was a very fun talk.
Thank you, Dr. Sterling.
So, speaking of that communication loop,
yes.
Elle, what do we have this week for our mailbag?
Mailbag today, we have one question from, I would assume, two brothers, Peter and Alan Dumfright. They write, how do stories become urban legends? Are there suburban legends? What about rural legends? And then just regular legends. What's the difference?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we had a little bit of urban legend, I think, on this episode, and
urban
a lot
legends.
of our episodes in the past, right? Some things are
urban legends, like I guess like Jersey Devil.
Right.
That's
it
an
can
urban
be real
legend.
and an urban legend, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I think they may have answered their own question, because if there is an urban legend, then it would stand to reason that there are also suburban legends and rural legends if it's based on location. So I would imagine like Bigfoot might be a rural legend.
Yeah, and I mean that really does get kind of into agricultural and anthropological questions, in that, before we had, what's a city, what's a suburb, what is urban and suburban. I think it's just easier for us to have, urban legends as kind of a modern legend.
Yeah.
You never hear anyone say, "Oh, have you heard the legend of, the 40-foot skyscraper?" And it's like, no, the legend of the dragon and Dracula and stuff.
Yeah, legends are like dragons, knights, like Lady of the Lake. And then legends like, Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth, like sports legends. Like I guess a person can be a legend. I guess that would make them legend.
There are there's living legend.
Living legends.
Right. So that I guess it isn't as cut and dry as I originally thought.
So they want to know what the difference is. I guess the difference is location and human versus not. I guess a living legend perhaps is a person, and an urban legend is an idea or a creature, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't. I think we'll have to.
I don't know.
If we want to get deeper, we'll have to bring on one of our sociologists or even an archaeologist, perhaps, and delve into this further. But that's a great question. So thanks for bringing that up. How can folks send us these questions?
People can email us. We have a brand new email, which may not be totally new now, but it's different than our old one. It's mail@realtruefactspodcast.com. And you can listen to the show at realtruefactspodcast.com. Send us mail through that one. You can also follow us on Instagram at realtruefactsgram, and you can always send us a DM, send us a message there. And sometimes we'll put up question prompts. So if you see something on our Instagram stories, you can always respond to it there. We like hearing from you guys. So reach out to us that way. And you can listen to the show on multiple platforms, right?
Yes. You can see us on just about every perceivable platform.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Every perceivable and conceivable platform. There's Apple, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, sorry, Spotify, Podbean, or you can just head to realtruefactspodcast.com, and it'll take you right to the Podbean. Even YouTube, if you use the YouTube app frequently, you can listen to the show on there. So just about everywhere. And if there isn't somewhere that you'd like us to be, let us know.
I find it very hard to believe because we are everywhere now. But yeah, anywhere that you listen to, because we have listeners from all over the world. So maybe there's a platform that's better for you. Reach out, let us know, ask us your questions. We will read your questions on the show, and we might even do a show about it. The show was based off of a listener question. So it always helpful to get topics that way. But I think that'll be it for us today. It's one of those things where I'm more confused leaving now, because hopefully you can trust your own brain. Hopefully, just you can do that. But I guess just get some sleep, eat something. Maybe you'll be able to remember things better.
Yeah, sometimes these episodes, sometimes we're fairly cut and dry when it's over, and sometimes it's like we just opened a whole new can of worms, or a whole new Pandora's box, and there are more questions. I feel like this has been one of those, where it's just more questions and even greater thoughts to be posited. So I think that's positive and beneficial as well.
Yeah, and we can revisit this on episodes coming up, we'll check in with Dr. Sterling again. So thank you to our guest today, Dr. Roger Sterling. Thank you to Dr. Seymour, who was able to join us today from the Science Bunker. Great stuff. And thank you, listeners from all around the world. We can't do it without you. Tuning in makes our job so much easier. So tell your friends, tell your coworkers, gaslight them if you have to, but nicely do it. Listen to our show and keep questioning your world, because just because you read about it or hear about it doesn't mean it's true. We'll see you next time on Real True Facts.